Hey hunters, it's me, your favorite gunner. You hunters already know that I love low-ranking monsters. I mean, I literally made an entire video talking about my love for low-ranking monsters. However, when it comes down to people talking about monster matchups and like who would win in a fight, it's always like the Apexes, the Elder Dragons, you know, the ones with crazy abilities fighting against another monster with crazier abilities. Which I mean, makes sense. It makes for very interesting discussions. But that doesn't mean that low-ranking monsters can't be fun to talk about when it comes down to a fight, and I want to prove that with this video. In a battle between two low-ranking monkeys, who would win between Bishaden and Kecha Wacha? I feel like this is an interesting matchup to talk about because not only are they both fanged beasts, they both have fun fights and are brimming with personality. And for any of you hunters who are wondering, I was initially going to do Ash Kecha Wacha versus Blood Orange Bishaden, you know, a fight between two subspecies monsters who both use fire. But while I was doing research for this video, I came to the conclusion that the fight would still end up the same, but the fight itself might be just slightly different. So since I feel like people know more of the base versions of these monsters than the subspecies, I'm going to talk about normal Kecha Wacha and Bishaden. So with all of that being said, I'm going to go over the strengths and weaknesses for both monsters, starting with Bishaden. Now, Bishaden isn't dangerous because he has an overwhelmingly amount of power or speed, but rather it's the way that he fights that makes him dangerous. We've seen this with other monsters like Nibblesnarf and Malfestio. Monsters that aren't like super physically strong or fast, but their abilities and the way that they fight make them such a dangerous foe to go against. In Bishaden's case, it's the way that he smoothly and swiftly dodges the enemy's attacks, then countering the enemy's attack by chucking a shit ton of fruit their way. Since the two main points about Bishaden is his movement and fruit, let's start with talking about his movement. Now, the core basis of Bishaden's movements come from his tail, and honestly, you might not even want to call it a tail. It's basically a third arm, because at the end of Bishaden's tail is pretty much just a straight up hand. Bishaden's tail hand isn't for show either. It's strong enough to easily support Bishaden's weight while being upside down. Okay, but Spottable, how does Bishaden move like that? How is he so nice with it? Brother, I'm getting there. Relax. The reason for Bishaden being able to smoothly spin himself to be able to avoid danger is because of the tail hand. Bishaden actually uses like 90s breakdancing movements to do this spin. When Bishaden spins, the wrist of his tail hand? I know it's kind of weird to say. It allows Bishaden to spin longer, but not just longer. It also allows Bishaden to be able to spin in a certain direction. Now, what's impressive about this is that Bishaden does it so smoothly with almost no wasted movements. This is a great move to use when you don't want to get hit by projectiles or if you want to conserve stamina. Because again, Bishaden is able to do all this off of like one little spin. Now, what happens when you take that move, but instead of using it for evasion, you use it for offense? Bishaden will start to wind up his entire body and then spring himself forward. While spinning, he's going to use his arms and tail to generate more speed while spinning. The additional speed from the spinning makes Bishaden's attack much stronger than if he was just simply attacking while standing still. However, Bishaden can make his ultimate move even stronger by throwing out a ton of fruit while spinning. Considering Almadron flinched in pain after getting hit by one fruit.
Whoa, Camel! Whoa! Come on, whoa! When I say whoa, I mean whoa!
Bishaden's ultimate attack can actually be pretty dangerous. Speaking of Bishaden's fruit, let's actually switch gears and talk about that now. Bishaden doesn't just use one type of fruit, but multiple types that have different effects depending on the color of the fruit. The orange one is just some normal fruit that doesn't have any special effects, and it's most likely the type of fruit that Bishaden eats the most, considering we do see him eat it in his cutscene. The rest of these fruits do have special effects, like the pink one is able to poison you. This kind of like limeish colored fruit paralyzes you. Also, both the pink and lime colored fruit are able to release a gas, I guess you could say, of their status effects. The last fruit Bishaden uses is a yellow fruit that when smashed creates a flashbang. Don't ask me how a piece of fruit creates a flashbang, it just does. I guess Bishaden is just that cracked at handling fruit. Now, we've seen Bishaden just kind of half-assed start chucking a shit ton of fruit towards his enemies. I mean, he actually has like two different versions of just chucking the shit out of fruit. The first one is with his ultimate move, which you've already seen. The second one is, I don't know how to describe describe it better than just saying random bullshit, go! His mentality with these attacks are just kind of like, eventually one of these are gonna hit. But don't let that fool you. That's only one way Bishaden throws fruit. Bishaden at any time can decide to throw his fruit with such impeccable aim, you think that he was a sniper in his past life.
Fuck you, kid.
And if he's feeling a little quirky, he might just decide to put a spin on the fruit to make it fucking curve mid-air. While Bishaden's main way of using fruit is just to simply throw it, Bishaden can also just use it as a part of his melee kit. Like when he was on Almudron and just grabbed a piece of fruit and just smashed it on Almudron's head. He also has a move where he grabs 2 poison fruits and tries to smash them on the hunter. So when it comes down to fruit, Bishaden is pretty versatile with how he uses them. He can use the fruit to flashbang people, he can throw a barrage of fruit at one time, or he could just use a single piece of fruit so he can throw it with more accuracy. If he's close to his foe, he can just kind of grab a piece of fruit and just smack you with it. Like, you really shouldn't underestimate how much Bishaden can do with his fruit. However, now we're gonna have to talk about Bishaden's weaknesses. One weakness is just kind of common sense, but it's understandable if you kind of forget about it. It's about the fruit that Bishaden uses. Because yeah, he does have a lot of fruit that he uses, but he doesn't have an infinite amount of fruit he can just pull out of his ass. And when Bishaden runs out of fruit to use, there goes all of his ranged options and the ability to use status effects. Also, if Bishaden just gets hit hard enough, he can drop a lot of the fruit that he was holding. And the last thing isn't really a weakness, more of a flaw, but it has to do with Bishaden's intelligence. Now, Bishaden isn't stupid, right? He's no Gypsaros. You see, while Bishaden does have a lot of good things going for it, like its mobility and fruit, Bishaden doesn't utilize its strengths to the fullest. For example, look at its turf war with Almudron. Bishaden was dipping and dodging Almudron's attacks, which was great, until he decided to get onto Almudron and hit him upside the head with the fruit. Which is like, why would you get near a monster that is physically superior to you in every single way? Dog, you have poisonous fruits, you have fruits that can paralyze enemies, you have a flashbang in your pouch. Why are you getting close to Almudron? Keep your distance like how you do with the hunters. But maybe I could give Bishaden a little bit of a pass here, right? He was trying his best. He was never going to win regardless against someone like Almudron, but I just can't give him the benefit of the doubt when it comes to his next interaction with Blood Orange Bishaden. When there were 2 regular Bishadens in front of Blood Orange Bishaden, they started getting pummeled by pine cones, and they were just kind of standing there. But okay, wait, maybe they were kind of getting dazed a bit, right? I mean, getting hit in the head is a confusing thing, and you aren't always sure what to do in the moment. Except only a few seconds later, Blood Orange Bishaden starts spewing fire onto the pine cones that they are standing on. And what do the regular Bishadens do? Nothing. They're just there like, ooh, man, that's hot. Hunters, I gotta ask you something. If you were on a campfire, would you just be kind of going, ooh, man, that's really hot, that hurts, while still being on it? Or would you just simply get the fuck out of the way to stop being burned? So when it comes to large monsters and monsters of similar size, Bishaden isn't always pulling off big brain plays with his fruit. In fact, it wouldn't be a stretch to say that Bishaden is pretty silly when actually fighting other similar sized monsters, or bigger ones at that, which, you know, doesn't make it any better. So overall, with the good and the bad, one thing is for certain: Bishaden is a big old goofball. And that's gonna wrap up Bishaden section. Now on to Kecha Wacha. Hi, future editing Spottable here. When I start talking about Kecha Wacha and the things that he can do, I like to show on the screen him doing that thing. But since I'm getting my footage from other people, I'm gonna be honest, they killed Kecha Wacha way too quickly for you to actually like see him do all the things that he can do. So when I say he can do something, you're just gonna have to believe and trust me that he can do those things. And just to make sure that I know he can do certain things, I even went back to my 2DS and fought him in Generations. So you hunters can rest assured that everything I'm saying here isn't bullshit. It's true. It's just that I can't really show it, you know, on screen. All right, cool. Spottable, take it away. When it comes to Kecha Wacha, there are 3 main points to talk about: the ridiculous movements that he can do while being near tall trees and canopies, his big ass claws, and of course the thing that he's most known for, his crash out mode. So let's start with Kecha Wacha's mobility. Kecha Wacha, regardless of where he is, can jump more than like a dozen feet into the air at any time he wants. He can do this either to quickly reposition himself, or he can jump and while still in the air, glide towards his enemies and attack them from the sky. And other than him running a little bit goofy, he doesn't really have a lot of mobility options when it comes to outside the canopies. So then let's talk about how he is inside the canopies. And honestly, it's borderline a domain expansion. 福満市 Because Kecha Wacha goes from, I could jump a bit, I could glide a bit, to straight up becoming Spider-Man. Kecha Wacha can do a bunch of stuff like swing swiftly on the canopies, hang upside down by using his tail as support, and then doing a 360 spin attack. He can hang upside down and shoot you with water, and even if you're above him on the canopy, that's no issue. He can just straight up attack you while underneath you. And of course, while he's hanging on the canopy, he could just simply swipe at you. I'm gonna be 1,000,000% honest here. Kecha Wacha moves completely different in the cutscene than he does fighting the hunters. My line of thinking is that he just feels much more confident when fighting in the canopies than when he's not fighting in the canopies. I mean, just look at him in the cutscene. This motherfucker is moving. That's why I'm saying that the canopies are Kecha Wacha's domain expansion. This dude schmoos completely differently when he's underneath a canopy. Now, it does seem that Kecha Wacha only does some of his more crazier moves while in the canopies when he decides to go into crash out mode, which is a perfect segue to start talking about his enraged mode, aka his crash out mode. When Kecha Wacha puts his ears over his face, he creates a pseudo helmet and completely blinds himself. And because he's blinded himself, he can't see where he's attacking, so he doesn't quite know where the enemy is. So what's the best course of action? Simple. Start attacking everything. While Kecha Wacha is like this, he doesn't need a canopy to go crazy. He can do combos, he can do flips, he can jump in the air, glide towards you, and then crash into you. And if you still don't understand how dangerous Kecha Wacha can be while he's in this state, if I had to compare Kecha Wacha while he's like this to any other monster, it would have to be Odogaron. They're both fast, they both use combos, they both use their environment. Like, I'm serious. While Kecha Wacha is enraged, he's a completely different monster. Of course, what actually brings all these things together and what makes Kecha Wacha really dangerous are those swords on his hands he calls claws. When you look at Kecha Wacha's claws, they remind me of like how a sloth's claws are. Big, curved, and used for climbing. But if we're talking about using these claws for lethality and as a weapon, they much more resemble the claws of a giant anteater. We can even take the comparison between a giant anteater and Kecha Wacha further. Giant anteaters use their claws like pickaxes to break apart the giant structures of ant colonies. And Kecha Wacha does something very similar. Kecha Wacha uses his big claws to break apart trees that have those giant insects in them. By the way, saying big claws is a major understatement. If we're talking about the main big claw on Kecha Wacha's hand, I've measured and estimated that big claw to be around 4 feet long. Oh my god!
Well, maybe we wouldn't sound so bad if some people didn't try to play with big, meaty claws.
What did you say, punk?
Big, meaty claws!
Now, I got that estimate mainly by estimating the size of the hunter compared to Kecha Wacha's claws in this image, but there's no official sources or statements saying that Kecha Wacha's biggest claw is about 4 feet tall. My fucking dumbass, I said tall, I mean long. However, because I was curious, I did ask AI to give me a rough estimate of the size of Kecha Wacha's claws using the hunter as a base measurement. And funny enough, AI came to around the same conclusion I did. It said that based on the hunter, Kecha Wacha's biggest claw would be around 3 to 4 feet long. Again, this isn't 100% factual, and the measurements can really just depend on how big the Kecha Wacha itself is, but I feel like saying 4 feet isn't a big stretch. I mean, I can show you another image of Kecha Wacha's claws that, yeah, you look at this and you go, yeah, I can see it being about 4 feet. So going back to comparing Kecha Wacha to a giant anteater, both the giant anteater and Kecha Wacha have the same idea when it comes to walking with their big claws. To make sure that their claws don't get filed down and become dull, they walk on their knuckles. That way, so their claws are always ready and sharpened for whenever they need them, whether to dig something out or use them as self-defense. And in Kecha Wacha's case, his defense comes in the form of razor sharp 4 feet long pickaxes for claws. Combine that with his crash out mode, the ability to glide and swing from trees, you have a monster that can certainly punch above his weight class. Now, as much as I love Kecha Wacha, it won't stop me from covering his weaknesses. Kecha Wacha has a big problem with like how powerful he could be, given certain circumstances. Like if Kecha Wacha is on a flat area in the middle of a field, let's say, and he's not crashing out, he's borderline fodder. Yes, he still has his claws, but if he's not crashing out, he's not swinging them as hard as he could be. On the other hand, if he's crashing out and he's near a bunch of tall trees and a canopied, brother, he's pretty much a monkey Freddy Krueger. So I guess in layman's layman's terms, Kecha Wacha's strength is solely dependent on his mood and his environment, which could be really good, but also really bad. And even then, Kecha Wacha's crash out mode does have its faults. Like, oh, you know, just a small little hindrance called not being able to fucking see. And while yes, it's true that in Kecha Wacha's fight, when he's in his crash out mode, sometimes he'll lift up his ear just a little bit to see where you are and then put his ear back down to completely cover his head. But he doesn't do that often. Now, what I'm about to say isn't 100% factual, but it's something that I feel like he does do. So while you're fighting him while he's in his crash out mode, he does somehow actually still go after you and attack you, despite not being able to see you. So I believe that he's using his big ears to locate you. That would also make sense why he still can't actually like know where you are, because he's just listening for you and his ears are down, so he can't really hear all that well. But he still has big ears. It probably just helps him to be like, okay, I know that someone is in that general direction. However, whether or not what I just said right now is true or false, that still doesn't change the fact that when he's in his crash out mode, he can't see, meaning that he can't see attacks coming, which makes things like projectiles especially troublesome for Kecha Wacha. And that's all the real weaknesses that I could think of for Kecha Wacha. Yes, I know he's weak to fire, but that's not going to be really applicable in this fight. So with Kecha Wacha out of the way, it's finally time to talk about Bishaden versus Kecha Wacha. Both monsters are about the same size and have incredible maneuverability. Kecha Wacha has more power behind his physical strikes, and Bishaden has more versatility in how he can attack through his fruits. Also, this fight is going to take place in the ancient forest. There's a lot of tall and strong trees to climb on, and there's a good amount of areas that, you know, have space enough for two monsters to fight in. So, between these two funkin' monkeys, who's gonna win? Before I do actually say who's gonna win in this fight, you guys should leave a comment who you think is gonna win. Alright, you guys got your comments off? Great, because the winner is Kecha Wacha. You see, there are two main reasons why Kecha Wacha wins this battle. Well, actually, more like three, but I'll get to the third one a bit later. The first reason is Kecha Wacha's claws. These are massive claws that if they hit Bishaden anywhere on his body, it would do some devastating damage. If Bishaden got hit on his arm wings, it would impair his ability to throw a punch or throw fruit. If his tail got hit, it would impair his ability to move. If Bishaden's face got hit, it could honestly perhaps one-shot him. The second reason is that Bishaden has a limited supply of fruits. Yes, I could give him the benefit of the doubt that he has a lot of fruit, but eventually he will run out. That's not even mentioning that if Bishaden gets hit hard enough, which he's fighting Kecha Wacha, he's going to get hit hard, he'll drop a bunch of his fruit onto the ground. And if you hunters are saying, nah, Bishaden has way more going for it, he should easily be able to win this. Which to that I say, I can't blame you. I kinda agree. When I looked at everything Bishaden had to offer, I came to the realization that he's actually like almost a perfect counter to Kecha Wacha. Because of Bishaden's tail, he has impeccable movement and dodging capabilities. I mean, it seemed like he was comfortably able to dodge all of Almudron's attacks until, of course, he got onto Almudron. I mean, regardless, Bishaden's movement should allow him to dodge Kecha Wacha's attacks for some time. And while Bishaden doesn't have an infinite amount of fruits, he still has a lot and a variety amount of fruits to throw at Kecha Wacha. Normal fruits, fruits that can paralyze you, poisonous fruits, a freaking fruit that can flashbang Kecha Wacha. He has a lot of options. And because Bishaden has impeccable aim when throwing his fruits, I'm confident in saying that 90% of the fruits that Bishaden throws at Kecha Wacha will land and hit. Bishaden could even use Kecha Wacha's crash out mode against him. Remember, Kecha Wacha can't see. Bishaden should be able to keep his distance away from Kecha Wacha because, you know, he be schmovin', he can dodge, and then start chucking a shit ton of fruit at Kecha Wacha. Because remember what I said, projectiles would be especially annoying to Kecha Wacha. And while Kecha Wacha is paralyzed and poisoned, Bishaden can charge up his ultimate attack and hit him for a good amount of damage. So how and why, despite everything I just said, still say that Kecha Wacha wins against Bishaden? And it all has to do with the third reason I mentioned before, that being one of Bishaden's major weaknesses. Bishaden doesn't utilize its strengths to the fullest. Because yeah, if we plugged in the controllers, we were telling Bishaden to do everything it should do, then yes, Bishaden would 100% beat Kecha Wacha. When Bishaden is fighting other monsters, he just doesn't do as much as he does with the hunters. When he's fighting Almudron, no flash fruit, no poison fruit, no paralyzing fruit. Not only is he not using those fruits against Almudron, he decides to go on top of Almudron to hit him with a fruit. fruit. When two Bishadens were up against Blood Orange Bishaden, when they were taking damage, they weren't moving out of the way. So yes, while on paper, Bishaden has everything he needs to beat Kecha Wacha, in practice, that's not how it would go at all. 100% that Bishaden would be able to dodge Kecha Wacha's claw swipes for a time, especially when he's not in crash out mode. And the poisonous and paralyzing fruits can be, you know, some trouble to Kecha Wacha, but Bishaden would still want to claw swipe at Kecha Wacha, tail smack Kecha Wacha. Eventually, Bishaden will run out of fruit. And all it would take is Bishaden not being lucky in dodging those 4 feet long claws. And Bishaden could either be critically injured or die. That means that the victory goes to the gliding crash out monkey himself, Kecha Wacha. Man, I don't know about you hunters, but as I'm recording and editing and doing this video, it makes me really appreciate the low ranking monsters. Even more than I did before. Like, this was a really fun matchup to talk about. If you hunters agree with me and made it this far into the video, please, for me and the winner Kecha Wacha, hit the subscribe and the like button. I'll keep on saying it forever. I really appreciate your guys' support, and trust me, October is going to be a banger month for this channel. Just you wait. And with that being said, I will see you all in the next video. Stay safe, my hunters.